Hello again, everyone. This is Michael from SolidCAD. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on collaborative and connected digital specifications with NBS. Next slide, please. So I am the national team lead at SolidCAD, and I am very excited about our partnership with NBS, which recently happened. We were able to meet with some of our key clients and introduce NBS to see of interest of managing building specifications digitally, and there seems to be a high interest here in Canada. So taking on this application has been very rewarding for us. And today's presentation is about learning a bit more about what the product capabilities are. Next slide, please. So SolidCAD is an Autodesk Platinum reseller. However, we do offer many other products that complement the Autodesk portfolio. As you can see from the slide here, we offer a few other visualization tools, express tools that work really well with Revit, and as I mentioned earlier, we've now incorporated and partnered with NBS, something we're very proud of. Next slide, please. On top of the products that we sell, we also provide many services. These days, most of it is around BIM, the technology, processes, and workflows. SolidCAD has offered these services for quite some time and continues to grow those services as well. Some of the services that many people are asking for these days include scan to BIM, so that's conversion of point cloud to Revit, for example, and also customization of the software is starting to grow at the same time. Next slide, please. SolidCAD ourselves has grown as well. So over the past 2 years, we've expanded across Canada with offices in many provinces, which include both sales and technical support. Next slide, please. Also, SolidCAD is part of a larger firm called Cancel that has multiple divisions. I'd like to highlight a few of them if possible. So we are the Autodesk representatives for Cancel, but as well as our Building Point division also handles things like Trimble and Tekla, as well as our Cobalt division deals with wide format plotting and printing as well. Next slide. So without further ado, I'd like to present our presenter, Paul Swaddle, Head of Technical Solutions at NBS. Paul?
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity from SolidCAD for NBS to present today. We're really excited about the partnership too. And I'm hoping that today I can give you an overview of NBS Chorus and how we can look at specification in a much more collaborative and connected way. So let's take you through that. So the aims of today are to give you a bit of an introduction to who NBS are. So for those of you who don't know who we are, a look at the construction industry and the need for change, and in particular, a better way to specify and to manage data. And then we'll have a look at NBS products and services and Chorus in particular. So NBS is a technology platform for the construction industry. We have thousands of users interacting daily with our platforms and our products and services worldwide. And then the majority are producing specifications using those tools. But we also provide product information, digital technical guidance, and help people to develop their digital models. And we mean that in the most holistic sense, providing access to great technical information to link with CAD information. We're based in the UK, but we have offices now in Canada and Australia. The acquisition of Digicon a couple of years ago by NBS gave us our base in Canada. Digicon may be familiar to some of you, producing specification information for a number of years. And we also have an office in Australia where we provide technical content and guidance as well. So we are beginning to kind of network and grow across the world, and we're seeing a lot of adoption of NBS and beyond the UK. Our history goes right back to the 1960s. And in 1973, we produced the first paper version of the NBS, National Building Specification. And everything since then has been a kind of technological development of the work that we do, but specification has kind of been at its heart. But even in 1973, we had this image, which showed the specification being linked to a library of technical information in manufacturer's literature, to a bill of quantities, and to drawn information with strong annotations between the two. Now, obviously, that drawn information is much more likely to be a 3D representation and to link to CAD and geometry information. But it's still really important that those associations and connections to the specification are made, and that's what NBS tries to do. We have two sets of customers in that the majority of people who use our specification products are design professionals, architects, engineers, contractors, and so on. And we also have product manufacturers providing technical data and specifications for their products, and advisory trade bodies as well. But the thing that NBS does differently, I think, is that we provide high quality data to match those two together, so that end users specifying are looking for high quality manufacturer information and it's reliable, and those advertisers need to know that the specifications they're getting are robust and full of the right performance information and so on. Here's just a few of our customers. We've got everything from the largest global engineering companies, and many of whom have a great base in Canada, like Stantec and IBI Group. And on the right-hand side there, product manufacturers, building product vendors like Saint-Gobain and Ideal Standard, everything from curtain walling to concrete to carpets within our products and services. And the thing that NBS does really well is to keep that content up to date. So this is just an example of some of the updates that we do, approximately around 13,000 every year. And so if you put that into context in terms of something visually, it would look something like this. So each one of these items being a piece of guidance that's been updated. And they could be huge content updates, but they're more likely to be updates to technical standards. And we do that to keep those up to date all the time, ensuring that you're using the latest content for your articles and your sections. So let's look at the wider construction industry and the need for change. This is an image that tends to get used quite a lot in BIM presentations, and it appears to be familiar around the world, where people tend to be in silos, and so from the client, information is thrown over the fence to the design teams, to the contractor, to subcontractors, and to the asset managers and janitors eventually, having to deal with that set of information. Things here tend to be paper-based. There's very little diversity in the industry, but everyone's working in these kind of silos, and this seems to be quite familiar across everything that we've seen so far. And we're not the only ones saying this. You can read a ton of reports that indicate that there's a huge amount of disruption that could take place in construction. Everything from 20% cost savings, 16% uplift in productivity, to the impact of digital and the need for a plan of action in terms of implementing BIM processes. This is from McKinsey reports and World Economic Forum, and these are some great reports to look at after this presentation. But here's a quote from John Beck, the chairman of ACON, and he's been in the industry for half a century, and he notes that actually, other than an improvement in safety, there's not that much difference in the execution of construction work compared to 50 years ago. So we still bolt things together the same, there's still the same inefficiencies, the same problems that happen on site in a regular way. And in terms of that McKinsey report, we can look at construction actually having really low digitization, and that has a direct impact on the productivity of the industry. So that even though you might expect IT and media and other industries to digitize really quickly, we're even behind mining and agriculture and forestry in terms of the digitization of our industry. And that really sets us back in terms of what we can do in terms of putting productivity right. NBS also produced reports, and so most recently we've produced the Construction Technology Report 2019, and we produced an annual BIM report indicating the level of BIM adoption that's gone on in the UK industry over the last year. And we've got tons of case studies and research and reports about the technology stacks that people are using on projects. So do check those reports out. And here's an example from one of those in terms of the NBS specification report. And this particular question is looking at specification difficulties. So what are the challenges that people encounter in terms of specification? And the example that we see here is over 50% were saying that the specifications of materials that was made in the design process are substituted at some point in the process. Other things, lack of communication, poor specification writing, and then the last two at the bottom, not being taught how to produce a specification, and then the others in the process were not using compatible software. And we see the same things come up time and again. A lack of quality in terms of specifications not being clear or concise, not being classified in a consistent way. A lack of time to spend on specification. So time tends to be spent on drawn information and on the model, and then the specification is left till a later point. And actually it requires the most experienced staff and therefore the most expensive to actually produce that specification information. And also to define the responsibilities. How much data is required for a particular system and who's responsible for generating that? Is it the contractor, the manufacturer, the designer, and so on. Not only that, but we found that over a third of the users who respond to our survey have seen a project go into dispute. And that's often when the specification is actually presented and probably read for the first time by many in the project team. And so a third of the industry going into dispute in terms of projects that they're working on. So when we know that disputes are increasing, often those are down to specification issues in terms of the way that that project might go. In the UK, we've been fortunate in terms of digitization that there was a mandate that was pushed forward by government to encourage BIM implementation across our industry. And this was in 2011, Francis Maud here saying that if the UK industry could push the kind of BIM agenda, we would actually become kind of leading in that market. And that's been the case, and we've seen real productivity as a result of that. It's also worth saying that obviously government as client has a huge portfolio of buildings, so we're aware that by becoming more efficient, they would also see cost savings as well, and that's obviously true of all global governments too. And so in 2015, the government produced a report indicating the savings that had been made to that point. And from the work that was captured in this document, they'd actually made that 20% target saving in 2014. So had managed that within 4 years to achieve that. That's not entirely down to BIM processes, and things like cost benchmarking and economies of scale are also attributable. But digital construction played a huge part in achieving those savings. And at the time, they were just in the design and construction phases, but now this can apply to the entire BIM timeline and to the entire project timeline. In the UK, this isn't just theoretical, though, the need to improve the construction industry. Many of you may have heard about the tragic fire in West London, at Grenfell, where 70 people lost their lives for a number of reasons, but one of them being the use of combustible cladding along with flammable insulation. And so that's been a real impetus to review, especially fire strategy in the UK. And in the shadow of Grenfell, Dame Hackett produced a report with a number of recommendations for how the building industry could improve. And one of those things was a digital record of the specification in the building. So all of the products and services that were used within the design and construction and any subsequent refurbishment of the building should be captured in a digital way. And that's one of the things that NBS is working to help to solve. And the way that we look at that in terms of the way that that's implemented is what we're calling the digital audit trail. And in practical terms, that's just making sure that whatever the requirement was at the start of a project, where the client or the designer has a real indication of this is the door set and this is the reasoning behind needing that particular product. And in UK parlance, in stage 3 or stage 4, the kind of technical design stages, you might have chosen the kind of product that you're looking for from a particular manufacturer because it achieves a certain set of performance requirements via performance, acoustic, security, certifications, and so on. But in the construction phase, that might be substituted by a contractor on site for a number of reasons. But the important thing is checking that all of those performance requirements are still captured and are still met by the new product. And then at a later date, when the handover of that information happens to the asset manager, ensuring that that data is captured to allow the product reference to be used in the asset management of that in the long term. So that at a later date when that door needs replacing and we're kind of into in-use phases, and somebody says, oh, well, we've got an Acme 1000, we can just use that. Well, no, we can't, because actually the performance requirements are set out and are stringent in terms of what's required for that particular thing. And that idea from design intent carrying right the way through to the operation of the building is being called the golden thread, and ensuring that that golden thread is carried through in all of the specification and product selection across the project. So what's the plan and how do we go about digitizing construction? Well, 20 years ago, Bill Gates quoted saying that the differentiation between those who win or lose in business, he was obviously talking about kind of large tech companies at the time, is how to do an outstanding job with information. And how you gather and use that data is the difference between success and failure. And so in the same way, the World Economic Forum report indicates that there's actually a real need to understand that information management is a real value creator. It's not just about a new cost of technology. So there's 3 stages to this in terms of motivation, so thinking of BIM and about digital construction, not just as a cost, but as a potential value creator for the business and understanding the benefits. Collaboration, if we're all using the same standards and open systems, we begin to communicate better and collaborate more effectively. And then the enablement, having the background, the clients, the contractors, and everybody working together to ensure that this isn't just about implementing technology, but about changing behaviors and processes right the way through the supply chain. Another way of putting that might be this example of Lisa and Homer, potentially thinking that they're talking about exactly the same thing, but maybe not in reality. So one benefit of that is that there's now an internationally agreed definition of what BIM processes look like. And that's because the UK's BIM documentation, the 1192 series that you might have heard has been used in the UK for a long time, has been adapted and adopted to become an international standard, 19650. And so ISO 19650 sets out what BIM looks like for a global industry and how that can be used operationally. So there's now a kind of standard way of us all collaborating and connecting our projects together. So let's look at NBS in that context in terms of connecting construction information using our NBS products. We start with NBS Chorus, which is our specification platform. It's in the cloud, allowing you to work within the browser that you're most familiar with. And that connects to standards and technical regulations and to a suite of product information and vendor information within NBS Plus. That links to create BIM content with all the relevant parameters and product data, and to a BIM toolkit, what we call the digital plan of work, all of the stages that are required, who does what when on a project. And then integral to that is the association between the model and the specification, and ensuring that those two are always kept in sync. So let's have a look at NBS Chorus in particular. Here on screen you can see NBS Chorus, and there's a couple of things to say. The first is that it's entirely cloud-based, browser-based, so I'm using Chrome in this example, but you could use whichever browser you are most familiar with, even an iPad or a tablet, and NBS Chorus will respond to whichever device you're using. Also, you'll notice that you have a kind of visual representation of the projects that you're working on screen, and they could be in any locations using our different content that we've got available. But because they're project-based, you can invite people to just have access to the specifications that you want. So within one of those projects, I could have multiple specifications associated with it. and invite somebody to just the relevant part of the project. And they wouldn't have visibility of the other aspects of projects that I was working on that I hadn't invited somebody to have access to. And here's a typical article within one of the sections of NBS Chorus. So in heavy timber framing, this section. And you can see that it's a digital way of working. So I can check out a particular article and begin working through it. And there are suggested values in lists that are dropped down to help me make choices. And on the right-hand side, there's always technical guidance to assist with the choices that you're making as you go through. Not only that, but we have a number of different content sets applicable for Canada. So the Canadian content is in both CMS and NMS. And most of our customers seem to say that there's a sort of public sector, private sector usage of those two sets of content. And the NMS is available in both English and French language as well. So here I'm going to add a specification, and I'm going to choose, in this example, the CMS content. And you can see how quick it is to search, so that I'm using the search engine, searching for windows, and then able to add that to the job really quickly, along with other content to this. And so I then get access to the familiar 6-digit sections that you're used to using in 3 parts, and then work through the articles as I work through them. Here's another example of a roofing system, and you can see that the examples here have these drop-down values that allow you to make the suggested values that you've got with all of the various product information associated with that, and guidance on the right-hand side to help you make those choices. Also, that NMS content is available in French language. So let's have a look at that too, for those practices and projects that require it. Sadly, my French isn't very good, so I can't admit to being able to translate some of this content for you. But it means that all of the same structure, same section and article structure, and the ability to use that is available for the NMS content in French language as well. And the guidance, where applicable, has also been translated to help you make those choices where applicable. And you're not limited here to the content of a particular article. You can choose to add and edit the content of each of those article rows as required, to adapt it, add sub-rows, and make it the way you want, even to duplicate entire parts of articles and reuse those as you begin to work through each section. Once you've done that, you can then choose to export this to Word if you need to have other branding or logos, or you can choose to use the browser engine that you've got to print the content of the specification really quickly into PDF form, for example. So you can see how quick you can move from starting a new specification to searching for content, working through a section in terms of the articles, and then outputting something that can then be viewed and edited. So a lot of potential to work much more efficiently and much faster than potentially you might be currently. Not only that, but we really see this as a collaborative platform. So we're keen for you to be working with others on the project team, and perhaps traditionally who haven't had access to the specification before, or who haven't had real influence in being able to change areas of it. So allowing those permissions and those controls to make sure that it's only the areas that you're comfortable with somebody having access to that they do. But in those circumstances, here's an example of 2 people working together. So on the left-hand side, somebody working in a browser view, and on the right-hand side, somebody working on a mobile device, a tablet, or whatever it might be, and using the UK content in this example, but being able to see that as I work through on the left-hand side, I can check out a clause, and then on the right-hand side, that user would see it as locked out, and they wouldn't be able to work on that. But by editing their own content, that's then locked out to the person working in the browser view, so that you have visibility of the changes that are being made in real time because they're being pushed to the cloud and saved. But in terms of having access to those you can collaborate with people and have multiple people working in the same section at the same time. Then this is about building a connected, collaborative ecosystem that's much wider than just the specification itself. So we can start that journey by looking at what we call the National BIM Library, our BIM content, which in this case we're looking for a particular security door, and we can search for that on the National BIM Library and look for that and drag it directly into the Revit interface in this case. And when you drag that into the model, that object comes not only with its 3D representation, but with all of the parameters and properties. So when I select that in the Revit view, you can then see on the right-hand side all of the various properties and parameters that you would expect that to have, are produced in a really standard way. And that's, again, in accordance with recommended standards in terms of being able to develop those. We also are integrating more closely with common data environments, things like BIM 360, Newformer, and Viewpoint, and integrating NBS with those common data environments. So in this example, if I show this on screen, we've got some clauses which will contain information like testing or inspection that might contain the term submit proposals or submittals required. And so what NBS Chorus can now do is to be able to find all of the instances of those terms like submit and export those as a submittals schedule to be able to export that or to import it into common data environments like Newformer and BIM 360. So that's in a format that's understood by those CDEs, and then in each of these particular CDEs on screen, you can see there a submittals report that's being generated, but still using those NBS Uniclass 2015 codes in this case to organize that content, rather than the manual task of somebody having to go through the spec and find everywhere that it says submit or submit proposals. What's really exciting to me is our integration with our CAD and modeling platforms as well. And we're working with multiple partners, Autodesk, Graphisoft, Vectorworks, and so on, to ensure that we can integrate NBS Chorus really closely with those design software. So the first aspect of that, here's an example of a Canadian project. This is courtesy of Next Architecture, a 120,000 square foot office. And the concept here, I should admit that this is currently in concept. This is an example of what we're hoping to develop using the Autodesk Forge platform, and showing the ability to navigate the specification information using an example of the model. So at the point in time that this model is uploaded, you can then begin to navigate through the specification by clicking on various areas of the model and see the clause content on the left-hand side and the sections and articles, but also begin to work through them live with the context of the model on the right-hand side. So that's currently in development in terms of using Autodesk Forge platform. What is live currently is the ability to integrate directly with the Revit interface. So our most advanced integration is currently in Autodesk Revit. And as a benefit of what Revit can do now, we can run NBS Chorus live in a browser panel within Revit. So you can see the model at the top, you can see a schedule at the base, and then you can see Chorus running exactly as it would in a browser on the right-hand side. What we can do is begin associating the model information with the spec, so that as we develop and move through the specification, we can then take all of, in this example, the roof covering systems, and begin associating each one of those with model information and spec information to make sure that that association is really close. That then means that annotations that are on any sections or plans of this drawing will always have the right reference, and they'll be kept in sync by NBS Chorus and our plugin in how we manage errors and warnings in terms of that. But it also means that for those users who are more familiar with Revit and with a modeling interface, they can have access to the specification and understand the impact of the decisions that they're making. If they have the relevant permissions, they can even edit the specification. So as we begin to see more and more users working in a modeling type way in a digital platform like Revit, being able to have access to the specification keeping those associations, you can see now on the right-hand side and in the schedule that they're now all coordinated between model and spec. Finally, we've, as if you didn't need more reasons to trust what NBS do, we've had some recognition of late that's been really valuable to us. We've won some awards in terms of the UK construction industry, and there's an article indicating whether NBS is becoming the Google of BIM in terms of the types of developments that we do. But also that World Economic Forum report that I showed you demonstrated that NBS was a good example of, in this case, the BIM library that I showed you of a data marketplace. And the key thing there being that we only provide information that recognize international standards, so that we've really made sure that all of the content that we deliver is of a really high quality. And then in Australia, a strategic forum for the Australian industry indicated that NBS was the leader not just in the UK but globally in terms of information management and our technology development. And we've seen great adoption of Unitas 2015 and NBS products and services in Australia, which has been really encouraging. So we're really encouraged by that. And you're probably familiar with the Henry Ford phrase about faster horses. And in this context, really, we think that what the construction industry sometimes does is try to make incremental changes. And that's really similar to Henry Ford saying that you're only ever going to get a percentage increase out of your horse, and it's never going to go past a certain speed. And what people really needed was something much more dramatic and a step change. And we understand in the same way that NBS Chorus is a sea change for the industry, and it is going to impact very differently. And that's why we're so excited to be partnering with SolidCAD to accelerate bringing NBS Chorus to the market. And more than that, to encourage you to move beyond word processing processes and some of the inefficiencies that do exist in the industry to really help you in terms of support and implementation and training to move to a digital way of working. So in terms of reasons to adopt, let's just go through some of those. We've looked at reducing risk on projects by having access to really great technical information and up-to-date standards. You've hopefully seen how fast and how accurate it can be to specify using NBS Chorus. It'll allow you to spend more time on the high-value operations that you need to do, the design activities and the work of design and construction, instead of needing to dedicate expensive staff to that task. And then to keep the information coordinated, and that's right through the production and construction processes, but then into asset management. And the way that this data is structured allows you to think about this as a whole project timeline. And what some of our customers have told us is that because this is cloud-based and because it's no longer requiring desktop installs, it's also reducing IT costs, in some cases by up to 50%, and because they're not having to manage the updating and installing of desktop software. So I've been Paul Swaddle, Head of Technical Solutions here at NBS, and I'll hand back over to Michael, and also to indicate if there have been questions as we've been working, and I'm more than happy to answer those as we move forward.
Thanks, Paul. That was fantastic. Looking at our questions board, there are no questions, which is great. Okay. By all means, if any of our customers are interested in learning more about NBS, the ability to maybe schedule a one-on-one session with the team from NBS is possible. Just contact your sales representative at SolidCAD, and we'll arrange for that to happen. So if there's no other questions at this time, again, we'd like to thank you for attending the webinar, and enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.